I have got a problem. And if you're anything like me, you probably also have the same problem. And luckily for us, the Greeks had the exact same problem too. And they're much smarter than we are. So, what is this problem, this thing that I want to talk about? Well, it turns out that when I look back on my life and all of the changes, the positive changes I have made, most of them before I got to the age of about 25, 30, came as a result of a bad situation. Something bad had happened, so bad that I had realised that if I continued the path that I was on at that time, that I would likely be led to a place that I wasn't fond of. And I realised that this was a theme and that it was probably not a good idea to be waiting around for something bad to happen in order for me to change. But the problem was that my life for the majority of the time wasn't bad enough to warrant me doing something about it. And I think this is something that you could probably relate to as well. You probably have this grand vision for your life, the way that you want things to be. Maybe you don't want to be a millionaire rock star. Maybe you don't want to be the next Elon Musk or whoever. But chances are that you would like to have a bit more money in your life. You'd like to have a bit more freedom. You'd like to have more career prospects. You'd like to have maybe more friends or closer friends. Maybe you'd like to have a significant other in your life. And for a long time you have wondered how to get there, or maybe you have read lots of books, listened to lots of podcasts, maybe you've even invested in some courses on how to improve your chances to get those things, and yet you haven't really done much about it. You're no closer to having what you want than you were when you first started this research hole that you were in. And this is definitely a trap that I fell into for years. And it occurred to me that I can't simply wait around for bad things to happen. I remember when I first got my break in sales, I was so fed up. I was running a window cleaning business at the time, and I was absolutely miserable. I wasn't seeing a single person on a day-to-day basis. I was doing a pretty thankless job, and it was boring. All I was doing was the same motion every single day, and while the money was okay and I had the freedom, it really wasn't where I wanted my life to be. And I got myself in a really bad headspace. I got into this nasty cycle of going to work, coming home and just turning on the Xbox and zoning out until I had to wake up and do it all again. And things for me got so bad that I was so fed up with the negative thoughts that I was having in my head that I literally just walked down to the local recruitment consultants to see what jobs they had available, and it turned out that they had a job there. And that was what began my career in sales. And that career in sales was a big turning point for me in terms of my confidence, in terms of my people skills, in terms of my financial situation. But we really don't want to have to wait until things get bad before we make changes, right? We want to be able to make changes on the fly. We don't want to have to suffer some horrible health scare. That's another big one for a lot of people, especially for smokers. It's another thing that I overcome. Smoking is one of those things that you don't really realise the damage it's doing until a doctor tells you or shows you on a scan how bad things have gotten. People changing their diets as well. Normally they end up with really bad health problems, but they happen so gradually you don't even notice them. And it's not until you get a health scare, the doctor tells you that if you carry on doing this particular behaviour that you're going to be dead in 10 years or whatever it might be. Finances is another one. We've all got a breaking point on that front, but there'll be a set amount of money that we have or don't have that will be the alarm bell that goes off in our heads. And more often than not, that set point is too low and it is too late by that point, and we find ourselves panicking, and more often than not have to take jobs that we don't want to take. If you've watched previous videos of mine, you'll know all about that one as well. And I mentioned at the beginning of this video that the Greeks had the same problem. And it was a relief to know that this problem has been a problem since the dawn of civilization. That man isn't incentivized, isn't motivated to do anything about his situation until it becomes dire. And because I didn't want to wait for things to become dire, and I'm sure you don't either, we need to work out a technique or something that can help us make changes before we have to make changes. To make changes because we want to, not because we have to. And so the Greeks very cleverly came up with this idea. The Greeks have always had this fascination with death. If you ever read a lot of Stoic literature, they reflect on this idea of death quite a lot, and it's something that scares most of us. It's one of those things that is absolutely inevitable. I can tell you with absolute certainty that at some point you will die, I will die, everyone you know will die. And that sounds miserable, and people don't like to think about it. They like to bury their heads in the sand about that sort of thing, and I can understand why. But it can also be quite liberating when you realise that your time on this earth is quite limited, and that ultimately whatever you do is going to be forgotten, given enough time. You know, there are the greats of history that have been remembered, and there have probably been hundreds, if not thousands, of kings and queens and great people that have become completely forgotten. So for us average Joes that just want to live a comfortable life, the reality is that your children will remember you, your grandkids will probably remember you, your great-grandchildren might see you in pictures or in videos, but your great-great-grandchildren, by your fourth generation, you're going to have been completely forgotten. No one's going to come and visit your gravestone. And as morbid as that sounds, it's actually quite liberating. It's liberating to know that whatever it is you decide to do with your life is inconsequential. So you might as well just do what you want to do, right? Within reason, of course, but most of us have morally acceptable goals and ambitions. And if we want to do them, we owe it to ourselves to pursue them. And so what was this technique that the Greeks had? They were obsessed with death. They used to think about death all the time. And the technique that they used was to cast their minds forward. So average lifespan at the moment is, I think it's 80, 85. I've realised I've just put myself in a position where I'm going to have to do math, which is not my strong suit. I may well cut this video to do the math on this, but let's say you are going to pop your clogs, you're going to die, you're going to meet your maker at the age of 85, and you are 30 now. So you have 55 years left of your life. So what the Greeks tell us to do is to cast our mind forwards 55 years to the day of your funeral. And you're in your casket, you are being walked down the aisle, taken to the furnace or whatever it might be. And I know this sounds super morbid, but bear with me, because it's something that was super helpful for me. There are two versions of this funeral. So the first version of this funeral that the Greeks tell us to imagine is this version where we do nothing, where we continue to live our lives exactly as they are now. And it may be that you're on a very steady path and you're just bored with your life, or maybe you're on a bit of a downward spiral. Maybe you've picked up some bad habits that you know are bad for you and that are going to affect you in the long run. Whatever it is, I want you to project your life by however many years till you hit 85. Project your life forward to the day of your funeral, and you've made no changes whatsoever. What does the person who stands up and gives you your memorial speech that tells people about your life, what are they going to say about you? Just think about that for a minute now. If you did nothing, if you changed nothing about your life and you just continue to live it exactly as it was now for the rest of your life, to the end of your days, what is that story going to be? Maybe pause this video and give that some thought just for a minute. And the next version, I said there were two versions of this funeral. The next version is to consider a life where you relentlessly and unapologetically pursued your goals and ambitions, and you really went for it in life. You did the things that you wanted to do. That's not necessarily to say that you succeeded in getting everything that you wanted, but you gave it a damn good go. And let's say you improved your financial circumstances, you got in great shape, you created a great group of friends to hang out with, you met the partner of your dreams, you bought a beautiful house and you were driving a nice car. What does that funeral look like? Who's at that funeral? What are they saying about you? And again, pause this video and just consider that for a minute. Don't let this be another one of those YouTube videos where you just click through to the next one and continue mindlessly absorbing information and not actually letting it sink in. This is a technique that works for anyone that is only motivated when things get bad, which is most of us, to be honest. Most of us don't have this mindset that makes the 1% the 1%. Most of us aren't born with this motivation, this driven motor that seems to drive people to success. You know, whenever I was listening to podcasts and they interviewed people who were running successful businesses or were doing something great in their field, whenever they tell their backstory, they always seem to have been the type of person that was always going to succeed. You know, they were the type of kids that were running lemonade stands when they were 5. They were setting up charities when they were 10. And I always wondered, as a guy that didn't have a substantial backstory as a kid, could I still be successful? And what I realized is that if I continued to wait for something bad to happen in order for me to change, that it was a really unhealthy way to be. And I didn't want any of the change in my life to be forced change. I wanted change in my life to be change that I accepted, change that I invited into my life, and change that I made happen through nothing other than making the decision to do so. So give this some thought, because the Greeks were really clever. The Greeks knew their stuff. You know, Stoicism started with the Greeks, and their teachings are still as relevant today, sometimes even more relevant today than they were back when Greeks were walking the earth. And we can learn stuff from them. And this tip, this technique that they had was massively helpful for me. And I've been able to create an awful lot of change in my life, not by visualizing a positive outcome, but by visualizing a negative one. We all suffer from fear to some degree, fear of not having this or not getting this thing, or sometimes getting this thing. But that fear can also be used positively. It's a double-edged sword. No one wants to experience fear, but you can use that fear to motivate you. You know, you are likely to run much faster if you have a angry dog chasing you than if you're just going on a run on a Sunday morning, if that makes sense. Sometimes I come out with some weird analogies. But don't let this be one of those videos that just passes you by. Give this some serious consideration. Two versions of your funeral. in however many years it is to your 85th, your death day, two versions of you. There's the version of you that followed this path that you're on now, that continued to live the life that you currently live. And this other version of you that pursued a life of meaning and of purpose and did the things that you wanted to do and had a damn good go at it. Because we don't know what's on the other side of things. And if this is indeed the only life we have, then we owe it to ourselves and the people around us to make the most of it. I hope this video was helpful as always. You can sign up for my email newsletter using the link in the description, and I will see you in the next one.